The rain had just stopped when Detective Pierce arrived at the downtown parking structure. It was nearly midnight, and the air still carried that heavy, metallic scent of wet concrete. A few fluorescent lights flickered above, buzzing faintly, throwing shadows across the empty rows of cars. The call had come in less than an hour ago, an abandoned vehicle, engines still running, lights on, doors locked from the inside. Security had found it on level 4. No sign of the driver. Pierce's shoes echoed sharply as he climbed the ramp, each step mixing with the distant hum of the city. He'd seen plenty of strange cases before, but something about empty parking garages always unsettled him. They were supposed to be temporary spaces, places of transition. No one should linger here this late. When he reached level 4, a single patrol officer stood beside the car, a silver sedan, headlights cutting through the mist still hanging in the air. Steam drifted from the exhaust pipe. "Engine's been running for at least 30 minutes, the officer said quietly. "No ID inside, no wallet, no phone. Just this." He handed Pierce a keychain, plain black leather, worn down, with a small tag. Level 4, reserved. Pierce crouched beside the car, looking through the driver's window. The seat was empty, but the cup holder held a half-finished coffee. Still warm. He circled to the back. The trunk was clean, no scratches, no dents. The license plate traced to a rental company that had no record of a current contract. That was the first red flag. The second was what Pierce noticed next, a faint smear on the ground behind the car. Dark, but not quite blood. Something oily. He knelt, touched it. The residue was tacky, and smelled faintly of burnt plastic. A camera above blinked its red indicator light, but when he looked up, he saw the lens had been shattered. Deliberately. Pierce straightened slowly, scanning the level. Rows of parked cars stretched into the shadows. Somewhere deep inside the structure, he thought he heard the faint creak of a door. Or maybe it was just the building settling. Still, that uneasy feeling crept back. Someone had been here recently. And maybe they still were. Pierce drew his flashlight and swept the beam across the far end of the level. The light caught dust swirling lazily in the air, and something else. Footprints. Faint, wet, leading away from the car and toward the maintenance stairwell. They weren't bloody, but the pattern was uneven. Whoever left them had been limping. He followed, step by step, the sound of his shoes echoing off the concrete walls. The closer he got, the more he noticed, a faint humming from behind one of the pillars, like a low electrical buzz. He angled his flashlight and saw a small utility door, slightly ajar. Pierce pushed it open. The hinges groaned. Inside, it was dark except for the blinking green light of a power control panel. Cables ran along the walls, dripping with condensation. A strange, chemical smell filled the air, not gasoline, not oil. Something sharper. On the floor lay a plastic ID badge. He crouched and picked it up. The name read, R. Mendez Parking Operations. He remembered that name. Security had mentioned him briefly, the night shift attendant who hadn't shown up for work in 3 days. But according to the report, his apartment was locked from the inside, and there'd been no sign of struggle. Just gone. Pierce slipped the badge into his pocket and turned to leave, when his flashlight flickered. For a split second, he thought he saw movement at the end of the narrow corridor, a shadow, sliding silently across the wall. Then the light steadied. The space was empty. He stepped out of the utility room and took out his phone to call for backup. No signal. He glanced at the corner. The thick concrete and steel structure must have been blocking it. The detective exhaled sharply, scanning the garage again. Something didn't add up. The rental car, the broken camera, the missing employee. All connected, but how? He started toward the next ramp, heading for the upper level. But halfway there, his radio crackled to life. A distorted voice broke through the static. "Detective Pierce, we've got movement on the lower floors. Cameras came online for a second. Someone's down there." Pierce froze. He looked toward the ramp leading down. A faint light flickered below, bouncing across the walls, like someone walking with a flashlight. He spoke into the radio. "Copy that. Keep the feed running. I'm going down." He drew his sidearm, adjusted his grip, and stepped into the shadows of the lower level. The hum of the idling car above faded behind him, swallowed by the deep silence of concrete. The deeper Detective Pierce descended, the colder the air became. The smell of damp cement mixed with the faint trace of exhaust fumes drifting from above. Each step echoed through the empty space like a slow metronome, steady and lonely. He reached the lower level, the B3 floor. Here, most of the lights were out. A few flickered weakly, leaving long, uneven shadows stretching across the concrete. In the far corner, the faint flashlight beam he'd seen earlier was gone. But something else caught his attention, a wet streak along the floor, leading between two rows of parked vehicles. It wasn't blood. It looked like water, mixed with oil. He followed it. The trail ended near an unmarked service van, its back doors slightly open. The detective approached cautiously, weapon raised, and nudged one of the doors aside with his shoulder. Inside were stacked boxes, plain cardboard, unlabeled, sealed with heavy tape. He took out a small folding knife and sliced one open. Inside were black plastic bags, each containing what looked like hard drives. Hundreds of them. Pierce frowned. He lifted one out, turned it in his hand. It was wiped clean, no labels, no numbers. He knew the look. Data storage. Industrial quantities. Then he noticed a smell coming from deeper in the van, metallic, sharp. He pulled another box aside. A man was sitting in the back, slumped forward, head resting against the wall. Dried blood stained his shirt near the collar. Next to him lay an empty syringe and a small, cracked phone. Pierce stepped back, heart thudding in his chest. He knew that face. R. Mendez. The missing parking attendant. He holstered his gun, reached for his radio, and whispered. "Dispatch, this is Detective Pierce. I've got a confirmed body in the lower garage, male, mid-30s, probable overdose. I need forensics and a hazmat unit, over." Static. No response. He tried again. Nothing. The silence pressed in. The flickering light above the van buzzed faintly, the only sound. Then his phone vibrated. One new message. No number, just unknown sender. He opened it. It was a photo, taken from one of the garage's security cameras. It showed him, standing right there beside the van. And behind him, a figure in a reflective vest, barely visible in the frame, watching from the shadows. Pierce spun around. Nothing. Just the rows of cars, stretching into darkness. He felt a bead of sweat slide down his temple. Someone was still here. And they'd been watching long before he arrived. Pierce steadied his breathing and glanced around the garage. Every sound, a drip of water, a creak from the pipes overhead, felt sharper now, deliberate. Someone was here. Someone who wanted him to know it. He crouched beside the van again and checked Mendez's phone. The cracked screen flickered, then went dark. It had been factory reset, except for one thing. In the photo gallery, one image remained. A close-up of a logo stenciled on a metal crate. It read, Rovenco Logistics, Level B4. Pierce frowned. There was no Level B4. The garage was supposed to end at B3. He stood up and swept his flashlight over the walls. Near the far column, half hidden behind a set of stacked tires, was an unmarked service door. Rusted, old, but the lock looked new. Someone had been using it recently. He pulled a small tool from his coat and worked the lock. A soft click. The door opened with a low groan. Beyond it was a narrow concrete corridor leading even deeper underground. No signage, no lights except a dim, orange glow at the far end. As Pierce moved forward, the air grew heavier, damp and metallic, like old machinery. The corridor widened into a loading area, much older than the upper garage. Large industrial fans stood motionless, coated in dust. A few shipping containers were lined against the walls, all marked Rovenco. He approached one and pried it open. Inside weren't tools or supplies. They were filled with paper files, shipping manifests, handwritten logs, even printed emails. The dates stretched back years. Every one listed different products, but all were shipped from the same address, a small warehouse outside the city limits. He picked up one file. Destination: Harper Clinic, Department 09. Pierce's stomach tightened. He'd heard the name before, in another case. A medical testing facility shut down for unauthorized experiments 5 years ago. Footsteps. He froze. Soft, careful, echoing from the corridor behind him. He switched off his flashlight and moved behind one of the containers, gun drawn. The steps stopped. Then a faint click, like a lighter being opened. A small flame flickered in the dark. The figure holding it wore a reflective vest. The same one from the photo. Pierce stepped out, weapon raised. "Police! Don't move!" The flame didn't waver. Then the voice came, calm, even, almost rehearsed. "You shouldn't have opened the van." Before Pierce could answer, the man flicked the lighter closed. In the brief darkness that followed, Pierce heard a soft metallic clang, then the hiss of gas. He barely dove behind the container before the explosion tore through the corridor. The shock wave threw him to the ground, ears ringing, vision spinning. He crawled toward the main door, coughing through the smoke, his flashlight beam cutting through the haze. Flames licked the walls, eating through the paper files. He stumbled out into the B3 level, gasping for air. Behind him, the hidden level collapsed in a roar of fire and dust. Pierce staggered to his feet, staring at the inferno below. All the evidence, gone. And whoever that man was, if he was still alive, had just buried the truth again. But as he turned toward the exit ramp, something caught his eye near the service elevator. A fresh envelope taped to the metal door. He tore it open. Inside, a single USB drive. And a note, scrawled in black ink. "If you really want to know what they were hiding, plug this in." Pierce stood there, the faint glow of the fire flickering in his eyes. The drive felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried more than data, as if it carried a choice. The USB drive lay on Pierce's desk like a loaded gun. He hadn't slept. The smell of smoke from the garage still clung to his clothes, and the ringing in his ears hadn't stopped since the explosion. He stared at it for a long time before finally plugging it into his laptop. The screen flickered, then filled with static, a digital snowstorm that hissed like white noise. Then an old logo appeared, Rovenco Logistics, Internal Archive Access. A single folder blinked on the screen. Surveillance footage, 2018 to 2024. He opened it. The files were all short clips, each labeled with a timestamp and location. Warehouses. Docks. Garages. Each clip showed the same thing, trucks arriving at night, offloading metal crates marked Rovenco. But there were no workers. The crates moved on their own, as if pulled by unseen machinery, sliding perfectly into place before the camera feed cut out. Then one file stood out. Pierce_District03_entry.mp4. His stomach tightened. He hadn't worked in District 03 for years. He played it. The footage was from a parking lot camera, shaky, grainy, timestamped 2 nights ago. It showed Pierce himself walking toward the garage entrance. The angle was wrong, like the camera had been hidden inside a vehicle. He watched as he entered the garage, flashlight in hand, just as he remembered. But then the timestamp glitched, jumping ahead 20 minutes. When the video resumed, there were 2 Pierces. One was walking toward the van, the other stood near the far wall, half in shadow, watching. The figure's movements were identical, down to the tilt of his head. When the real Pierce looked up, the copy vanished from the frame, as if it had stepped backward into the dark. The screen cut to black. A message appeared in white text. "He's not the first. He won't be the last." Then the laptop shut down. Pierce stared at the blank screen. His reflection looked back, pale, exhausted, but something about it felt wrong. The reflection's mouth moved, just slightly, before his own did. He closed the lid and stood. His pulse pounded against his ribs. Every instinct told him to walk away, to hand this off to someone else, anyone else. But then he remembered Mendez. And the others. People who had gone missing near Rovenco's facilities, written off as accidents or clerical errors. He grabbed his coat and the USB drive. There was one place left to go, the address listed in the old shipping logs. A warehouse outside the city limits. The drive to the outskirts took an hour. The city lights faded in the rearview mirror until there was nothing but empty highway and fog. Eventually, the GPS led him to a fenced-off compound surrounded by rusted shipping containers. The sign out front was sun-bleached and half-buried. Rovenco Storage Solutions. The main gate was unlocked. Pierce stepped inside, the crunch of gravel echoing under his boots. Rows of dark containers stretched into the mist. At the center of the yard, a single one stood open, its door swaying slightly in the wind. He approached cautiously. Inside, the container was empty, except for a single office chair bolted to the floor. A headset rested on it, connected to a small console still humming with power. The console's display glowed faintly. "Incoming transmission, accept?" Pierce hesitated. Then pressed accept. The headset crackled. Static, then a voice. Soft. Calm. Familiar. "You made it, Detective." Pierce froze. It was his voice. "They needed someone to take your place. You found too much, and now the line has to stay open. That's how it works." Pierce pulled off the headset, but the voice kept coming, not through the speakers, but echoing inside the container. "You understand now, don't you? Every call needs an answer. Every investigation needs someone to stay behind." The door slammed shut behind him. Darkness swallowed the space. The console screen shifted, showing live footage, the same parking garage, empty now, except for a new envelope taped to the elevator door. On the screen, a uniformed officer entered the frame, flashlight in hand. Pierce recognized him, another detective from the department, responding to the explosion. The officer looked directly into the camera, confused. Then, faintly, a voice came through the feed. "Detective Pierce? Can you hear me?" The static grew louder, wrapping around him. When they found the container days later, it was empty. No trace of Pierce, no equipment, no sign of forced entry. Just a single line scrawled into the metal wall, deep enough to cut through the paint. "Call received."